Welcome back to the Dr. Doug Show. Today I have an interview for you with Bria Gadd. Bria is an expert in the space of perimenopause, hormone fluctuations, and how to see through the noise that is the conversation of what's happening with my hormones and what are my symptoms coming from in perimenopause. We go very deep in this conversation talking about lifestyle recommendations that she has for her clients, which are a little bit different than some of the ones I have for mine. We do a little bit of a stop off and a deep dive on sexual dysfunction that occurs with perimenopause with some interesting recommendations from Bria on that. If you are in the perimenopause or you know someone that is, please pass this along or listen to this, because I hear from my patients that are in this time frame of 35 to 50-ish. This is a very challenging time for some women, and there are so many things that you can do to help to improve what might be considered symptoms of perimenopause. So take a listen to me and Bria as we go through this. I hope you enjoy it. Bria Gadd, welcome so much to the Dr. Doug Show. This is going to be kind of a different perspective, a different angle than most of our listeners are used to. But why don't we start by just giving you an opportunity to talk a little bit about the work that you do and potentially how you got there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for having me on the Dr. Doug Show, Dr. Doug. I always love talking to other people about these things. And yes, my name's Bria. I am a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, holistic health coach, and I specialize in female hormones, specifically in the perimenopause and menopause years. And really the short story of how I got there is when I'm 43, almost 44 now, but when my kids were young, I originally built an online business in the fitness and nutrition space. So at 37, I was like, okay, I don't have everything figured out, but I've got my fitness and nutrition figured out. And I really started to notice a shift in my clients around that age, around 35, 36, 37, coming up to 40. And then I really started to notice a shift in myself. I just wasn't getting the same results. I was feeling more fatigued. I was seeing changes in my own menstrual cycle. And yet I had changed nothing, and I started to hear this more and more from my clients: raises in anxiety, poor sleep, and what I like to call undeserved weight gain, where I'm still doing the same intense workouts I've always done 6 days a week. I'm still eating the same way I have, and all of a sudden my leggings are feeling tight. And I think this is something that a lot of women can resonate with, but being in the wellness industry, I was like, this is not making a lot of sense. And it was my sleep. It was starting to wake up every night around 2 to 4 a.m., like in a sweat, that had me go to my healthcare practitioner, who was wonderful, asked all the things, did all the blood work, and looked at me and said, Bria, you're the picture of health. And I remember thinking, well, I'm glad that I don't have any of the awful things that come up when you Google night sweats in the middle of the night. Don't be Googling. Dr. Google is not your friend. But I felt very disheartened. And I thought, this cannot be how I feel at 37. What are the rest of the next 37 years going to feel like? And if I don't know how to fix this, how are women who have other huge, wonderful jobs in other areas other than wellness going to understand these things? And so that was the real pivoting point in my career, moving from, as a fitness and nutrition coach into hormones, into better understanding the female body and what was going on, which for me was certainly the beginning stages of perimenopause and some of the things that were being impacted by it.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. And we were talking before we hit record, and I wanted to put out there and ask you publicly and openly how old you are.
Yes, I am 43. I will be 44 in a few months this year.
Yeah. And I say that because you look very young, so you're aging very gracefully.
My hormone.
Yes, right. Your optimized cycles and hormones. But no, but I think that's true. And when I talk to our patients, because we have patients in a full spectrum of age, I have patients in their 20s, I have patients in their 80s, but there is that perimenopause time frame from call it mid 30s through around 50 for most women. Can be really problematic. So I really want to focus on that today. We spend a lot of time post-menopause for our listeners, and that's great. That's needed too, but I don't spend enough time talking to experts in the space around perimenopause. So I want to dig into that today, if that's okay with you.
Yes, please. It's my
Okay,
favorite.
cool. So why don't you give us just a little, kind of a little background around what happens with the menstrual cycle through perimenopause? Maybe kind of hit on some of the hormone perspectives of it, but give us a sense of what's happening for this 10, 15 years that is a really, really critical time in the life of every woman.
Yeah. I'm a huge metaphor person, so I always really like to think of this time as our reverse puberty, and in puberty, which has a range of time of when it starts for our children and for us when we were there, is really when our ovaries pick up the job of reproduction. So they kind of come to the table. They're going to, create a lot more of these main sex hormones. They have their own rhythm that they follow month after month that most women understand. And perimenopause is just really the beginning of the ovaries considering their retirement. So they're going to, and culminating in menopause where they officially retire. And in that retirement, they pass the job of these sex hormones to really your adrenals to take on full time. And our adrenals as our stress managers, like the state of them at the time that our ovaries are going to retire, really is going to play a big role in many of the symptoms that we have or don't have as women. But hormonally speaking, what we see in this time is the decline of our estrogen and progesterone primarily. So often progesterone starts to decline first, which is really critical for our ovulation. So we might start to see periods getting closer together or longer apart. We might see them just less regular. And our estrogen can typically begin to fluctuate during this time. And that's where we start to see things like hot flashes that we're familiar with, or maybe a little bit more anxiety, some mental stuff that comes up for women because these hormones really impact our brain during that time. But the way not to in any way negate the impact of this on women, but I believe we all understand that all transitions, like this one of our ovaries retirement, require more energy for us in life, right? Whether you're moving houses, moving careers, selling businesses, having children, getting married, getting divorced, we know that it requires more energy of us during this time. And that's typically a little bit more stressful for people. But if we have solid foundations in our health, this transition can be something we manage and really regularly doesn't bother us. Sometimes it will, for sure, as all transitions. The trouble comes in, I think, is when our foundations of our health are maybe not where they should be as we enter into this time frame. And I think this is when we really start to notice the suffering that a lot of women are experiencing.
Yeah. Well, so you mentioned a couple of things in there that I think are really important. And, my own personal experience, obviously, I'm not going through perimenopause, but my wife is, similar age, and she's a busy entrepreneur. We have 3 kids, and I see this same story play out over and over again in my patients too. And one of the things you mentioned that I want to go back to is adrenal health. So can you just pick up on that a little bit and give us more? Because I think the adrenal picture is a big part of why women can be very symptomatic with fluctuations in hormones when maybe, and I don't know this to be true for sure, but I'm thinking probably in generations past, this actually wasn't as big of a deal with a different lifestyle. And we'll come back to that piece. But talk to me more about why the adrenals are so important here.
Yes, absolutely. So I always think of, although our whole body is really connected, gut, adrenal, thyroid, sex hormones, immune function, everything's really, really connected and plays off of each other. I still think of the gut and our HPA axis, our adrenal function, as kind of the king and queen, right? A lot of things come downstream of these things. They will be impacted by everything else, but if they're off, it's really going to throw a wrench into some other areas downline, specifically our sex hormones. So our adrenals, they put out, I think, 2 of our key adrenal hormones are going to be cortisol and DHEA. Cortisol is a catabolic hormone that breaks down the body in the name of survival, but it also provides us a lot of energy. It fights off sickness. It helps us repair from workouts. There's a lot of really important aspects to having cortisol. And DHEA, which is sort of our anabolic answer to cortisol, kind of comes to the table after cortisol is called upon to clean up its mess. DHEA is also the parent to estrogen and testosterone. So if it is tired, if cortisol is tired, DHEA is going to be tired, and now our sex hormones are not going to be made the same way. So right away, we're now having issues in our sex hormones that have nothing to do with our ovaries. And with time.
Yeah. Well, and so you said it quickly. What are the things that I see consistently? Because I'm measuring labs. Do you do labs in your practice, or are you talking mostly symptoms? You do labs too.
No, I do labs. Yeah.
So tell me if you see the same thing then. So what I find in the women who I think are having the hardest time going through perimenopause, and we're wondering, is it hormones? What's happening with hormones? I like to test, although the test doesn't always answer the question, but I like to try. And one of the things I see consistently is low levels of testosterone, which is made primarily in the adrenals from the DHEA precursor. Do you think that has something to do with this whole picture?
Absolutely. I think it does. The funny thing for women, the whole picture of how women are feeling, or the whole picture of adrenal health, or
I think both, right?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a funny thing, a lot of the symptoms we hear about that women are suffering with, right, are what, inability to lose weight, low energy, low fatigue, not repairing from workouts, all of these things. And testosterone is absolutely going to play a role in all of those things. Yep. So is estrogen, so is progesterone. So we don't really know who the key player is unless we test and really get a better look at, okay, well, if we want to have an optimized perimenopause transition, like if we want to be ready for the ovaries to check out of this job, then the adrenals need to be in a really great, robust position. And often they're not, because of everything our bodies have been through and what we've put them through leading up to this point.
Yeah, absolutely. So then in our practice, we do a lot of hormone replacement. Again, most of our patients are post-menopause. We do some hormone replacement and optimization for women in perimenopause, but my primary goal is to focus on the non-hormone replacement options. And that's what I want to talk to you about, because you're not doing you don't have anybody that's doing hormone replacement for you, right?
I do bioidenticals for my clients if it's the right thing. But I will say, Dr. Doug, so I primarily work with women 35 to 50 is where I see women most commonly. And again, we might do temporary bioidenticals just to relieve some symptoms, but ultimately the reason that they don't have hormones is not because their ovaries have retired yet. So we're really trying to coach up the function of the adrenals, of the gut, of the thyroid, so they come back.
So let's get into that, because I think there's definitely a role for using bioidenticals and replacement. And I don't necessarily want to get into the details of that right now, but I would love to talk about what women can do outside of the replacement piece, especially if they're not. I was just having this conversation recently with a woman, we were talking about progesterone support for her. And she was like, I'm barely 40 years old. I don't want to take this for the next 60 years. And I was like, yeah, fair. So let's look at some other options. So then, how do you start then? If we're going to talk about other tools, what are we even talking about?
Yeah. So I think for me, when I'm working with clients, we're always going to begin with what I like to call like the kindergarten foundations of our health that so many of us have gotten away from. If we think about, whether you are needing to take bioidenticals or hormone replacement therapy or not, it really doesn't help if we don't have these foundations in place. Just like you can take all the supplements you want in the world, but if your body's not ready to receive them, if it's not absorbing and receiving, then we aren't going to be able to get the benefits of those things. So I think I like to look to 4 kind of key pillars of health always. We're always looking at sleep and really the habit creation around sleep that we need as women in this age. So a lot of women suffer with sleep issues in these shifting years of perimenopause, but I think we can't control it, but we can create the proper space for it. So just the very simple goal of having a sleep routine, what you do that last hour before you go to bed to really calm the central nervous system. So you have a regular bedtime and a regular wake time, and that time in between for women really should be 8 hours at least. And what we do first thing in the morning, right? Getting out, getting a little sunlight in our eyes, hydrating, things like that is such an important foundational piece that all living creatures need every single day. And yet we've gotten away from it. Yeah. So that's a very simple one, number one.
Yeah. What's number 2?
Number two is nutrition. I mean, I think that there's so many different fancy ways to eat out there. There's so much discussion around, nutrition plans and diet plans and things like that. And I think the most powerful thing we can do for our, reproductive hormone cycle is have a healthy circadian rhythm with consistent blood sugar in our body. So I think before we get fancy, we need to make sure we're waking up. We are eating within 2 hours of waking. We're eating enough of the right foods in that meal that keep us full and satisfied for 4 to 5 hours. And this is where I think some of the work comes in for us, so that we have a proper breakfast, we have a proper lunch, we have a proper dinner. If you got to go more than 4 to 5 hours, sure, you have a snack in there. And you can tell if you're eating enough, if you are staying full and satisfied long enough in that time frame. So really making sure that you're just bringing it back to these basics of nourishment, because I think a lot of perimenopause is just an added energy demand for people. So now we're running low in this energy supply and demand deficit. So coming back to these key sources of energy like sleep and nutrition are critical, because we can't buy energy anywhere. You can try, but it's going to cost you something. That's what caffeine does. So
Right.
So looking at your nutrition, making sure it's the kind of food that doesn't rob you of more energy than it provides. So that's what, again, coming back to those whole foods, eating enough in that meal, and eating consistently is a really key part of just supporting our hormones. And it sounds unsexy and boring, but it works.
Yes, I also have unsexy statements around nutrition.
I know.
So tell me about, the idea of fasting and fasting for women. You said eat within 2 hours. What if someone is liking the idea of fasting? What do you tell them?
I think, again, this is where it's so independent on women, right? I think that if we are dealing with hormonal symptoms, to me, that tells me we are in a bit of health debt, where the energy supply is not meeting the energy demand. So not fueling the body during a very critical time that it needs fuel first thing in the morning is a really bad idea. It's just creating more energy demand. We wake up in the morning and we should have our greatest cortisol spike at that time. And if we don't eat, that cortisol is spiking higher. If we're drinking caffeine, it's spiking higher. If we're working out, it's spiking higher. And all of a sudden we are having massive energy drops in the afternoon, and we don't have enough cortisol to do the things we need to do or get through the day. So although I think there's some wonderful benefits to fasting, for most women in this time frame, eating fine, eat at 8 a.m., eat at 12 or 1, eat at 5 or 6, and then don't eat again till 8. That's 14 hours. That's a
Right, I know.
long fast.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so that's number 2. What's number 3?
Number 3, I'm a big fan of what I like to call functional movement. I come from a fitness trainer background. I'm a lover of fitness for sure. But I think before we're out doing intense workouts, we really need to make sure in this day and age we're establishing functional movement, like the basic needs of our body, because most of us now are sitting, desk to desk and quite sedentary all day. So for me, that means like every day getting outside, getting those 7 to 10,000 steps in every single day. That should be a no matter what for your body. And also what I like to call like hitting the mat 3 times a week, just for some stretching or yoga, depending, whatever you want to call it, that you'll do it. Let's pick one of those things. If we don't have time to do those things, we don't have time yet to be lifting weights and leveling up into like Olympic levels or athlete levels of workouts for our body. We got to lay this groundwork first. And that kind of movement provides energy to our body without asking anything of it.
I like that. Yeah, the stress of exercise, I think, is an interesting conversation especially for women that are struggling with that energy debt.
Yeah. For sure. And most women, it's, when they freak out when I pull their fitness, but then they're like, oh, I'm eating more and I'm working out less. And now I actually have energy all through the day again. And we want to get back to fitness. It's like putting on muscle is like the gold standard for us aging well and building great hormones. But it's kind of like spending money you don't have. You're just going to put yourself further in debt. So let's save the money and then invest the money in the muscle when we have it.
I like that. Yeah. Okay. What's number 4?
Yes. So number 4 is pleasure. And I tie this so closely to stress, but one of the most powerful ways that we get energies as human is purpose and pleasure in life, just by laughing so hard that you cry, by catching up with an old friend, by orgasming, like in so many different ways. And I think people can appreciate this when they remember the last time you fell in love. Like the last time you fell in love, like you don't even think about eating. Like you can talk all night long, right? Like you just have this surge of energy coming into your body. And we feel this when we go to concerts, and we feel this when we're like out doing our thing, right? It just fills us with so much energy. So it's a beautiful energy source for us that I think helps calm that central nervous system and provide more to the body to work with. But it's tied very closely to stress, because everyone knows that it's hard to take a joke if you're stressed out. Like it's hard to find joy. It's hard for women to orgasm if they're stressed out. So we really need to have like an active daily stress management practice and an active daily pleasure practice.
So can we pick those apart? So what would the stress management practice look like?
Yeah. So I mean, this can be anything like this can be tied into your daily walk. I think that can be very stress reducing for people. But I love little things like vagal nerve exercises. I love a good scream in the shower or scream in the car. I love singing to a song at the top of my lungs, dancing if that's your thing, or more calm things like laying on the ground with your legs up against the wall, or just kind of like some gentle, self-touching where you're just calming your body down. Or it can be meditation or breath work or journaling. Any of those things that can take 3 minutes that can really help reduce the stress that we have in our life and create space for pleasure.
Yeah. Do you think it matters timing of some of those things? Some big advocates for like, journaling first thing in the morning or meditating before you have coffee at dawn. What are your thoughts on some of the nuance there?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's when you're going to do it is the best thing. Like, I think is what we're going for, because there are times in the day where I think it's easier to meditate because you haven't started your day yet. And maybe it's quieter and your kids aren't awake. There are times in the day where, it's easier to, go scream in your car. So it really just depends on you and when you can regularly start to fit it in your life. But you have to practice and try these things.
Yeah. Okay. So that's stress. And then what does a pleasure practice look like?
Yeah. I mean, sure. A pleasure practice could be sex and orgasming for sure. That there's like a very simple one there for people. But I think it could also be just taking a look at your childhood and remembering the things that brought you a lot of joy. Like, I think just listening to a song that is one of my favorite songs as I drive is one of my favorite things to do. I grew up loving horses. So just watching horses can bring me a lot of joy. Dancing, going out dancing with friends can bring me a lot of joy. For some people, doing a crossword, like it really is it's up to you. And I think that's what's so beautiful and unique about pleasure, but it needs to be something that I think is just for you or isn't requiring a responsibility of you while you do it. I have a lot of women who are like, oh, I have joy with my kids every day. I'm like, great. I have joy with my kids too, but you're still responsible for them when you're having that joy. So something that is like solely for you that literally brings you joy.
Yeah, that's really nice. I'd like to double click a little bit on the sex and orgasm part, if that's all right.
For sure.
So, because we talk, in our practice with our perimenopausal patients, we're always asking about symptoms. We're very open and willing to talk about sexual dysfunction. And we hear very consistently, that even for women that had a great, a great relationship with their partner and the relationship hasn't changed, but yet the sex has. They are, less interested, and we'll just stick with the woman on this side, but maybe less interested, not happy with kind of how things are going, just with the connection between her and her partner, maybe less, like you said, less capacity to orgasm, performance reduced from their perspective. Like, how do you help women to grapple with that, and then and what do you do about it?
Yeah. I think about libido, I guess we'll call it, it comes in so many different ways, right? There's desire, I don't even have the desire to initiate. There's once where it's going, I'm good, or maybe I'm not good. And then there's lubrication, right? So there's sort of a few different areas in there. I think for a lot of women, the issues begin with libido sinking, come down to energy. Again, we're going through life, we're juggling all these balls as we are, and now all of a sudden, the ovaries are going to start their retirement, and that's another job for the body. So our energy demand has increased. And when our energy demand increase, if our energy supply doesn't increase, suddenly we have this deficit, and the body's like, okay, well, it's like I'm on a deserted island here. I now have a deficit of what I need. So what do? I shut down non-essential personnel, which is our reproductive hormones. So then we see a dip in testosterone, which has a lot to do with our drive, and estrogen, which impacts our drive and our lubrication, these things. So one, I think having a little compassion for the fact that it's just a busier time and starting to look at, okay, how can I decrease some of the demand on my life? And how can I increase this supply, which might be as simple as, asking your partner to handle things so you can go to bed earlier, or, focusing on your nutrition a little bit better, getting these foundations in we talked about. Or it might be, working with, a practitioner so that you can repair the actual function of this energy to you. Because as we age, we're not brand new engines. Things don't maybe move as smoothly as they used to. So there's this one piece, Doug, about, I think, just making sure we're working on this energy supply and demand. And then I think the other piece of it, which is so important for women and their partners to understand right now, is from puberty to perimenopause, women have been hormonally hijacked every single month, really, by estrogen to put on these rose-colored glasses, to put everyone ahead of ourselves in the name of reproduction. It's a very important hijacking. That's starting to go away. And what we're left with are some real feelings that don't get hijacked every month with the rose-colored glasses. So that plays on our mind a little bit. And I think self-exploration, of course, whether it's therapy, whether it's working on these things, can be very helpful. Communicating can be helpful. But I also think just doing new things can be really exciting and really invigorating for a relationship. Like when you start out of a relationship, everything's exciting. So your libido is like through the roof because everything is new. And now we're 40 something. So you've known this person and been with this person for quite a lot of time, probably, and nothing's new. So you have to actively look for new experiences, to see your partner in a new light, to experience them in a new way. That I think that's what drives some of the juices again back into us.
Yeah.
So there's kind of these two sides. And then, of course, hormones can be helpful if they're the right fit.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting. In the book I wrote on why your hormones might be failing you, talking mostly about hormone replacement. I think it's interesting when you look at the literature on testosterone replacement, there is benefit, but it's not as profound as I would expect it to be. If it were just a testosterone deficiency, you would see the improvement to be massive, and it's not. It's helpful, but it's not. And I think a lot of it comes into what you were just saying. Like there's a different language around the conversation of intimacy as we get into our 40s and 50s. Like it just changes. The noise changes, the drive changes, and it's not necessarily all negative either, but it's very different, and it is a totally different game.
It is. It absolutely is. And I think we can kind of think, oh no, this is what, there's nothing we can do. Or we can really look at the gift of this time. Most of this is beginning in midlife. So we still have half of our lives, to have great sex, to learn new things, to feel really amazing. And we know so much more about ourselves. So grab this gift and run with it. Recognize it's kind of shaking you up, to point out the areas that aren't really serving you, and make those changes now so that you have the next 40, 50, I plan to live to 100. So, it's a good 50 plus years for me to do anything I want to do.
Yeah. I was just at a conference where 180 was the goal. And I was talking about bones and hormones. And I was like, look, if you want to live to 180, you really need to have a very solid musculoskeletal system. It's a long time. But you're right. So if we, I look at menopause, we say, oh, it's the next chapter. No, it's like halftime. Yeah. It's the next half of your life, realistically, assuming our life expectancy continues to start climb. But it really is the next half. And this is why I'm such a big advocate for hormone replacement, because it's hard to thrive in that half for 50 years without some kind of sex hormone input.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do agree with you. And I think one of the beautiful things of digging in and doing lab work is making sure that your body, has the detoxification pathways to get the most out of your hormones when you bring them to play. Because if we shouldn't have to suffer if we don't need to, right? Let's thrive.
Right. Let's thrive. Okay, cool. So we got sidetracked by sex a little bit there. But let's talk we got the foundation. But what's next after that? So stopping short of actually replacing hormones, do you have like a go-to supplement stack? My audience loves it when we talk supplements. Do you have a go-to supplement stack? I know it's got to be individualized, but just some general comments around optimizing nutrient intake?
Yeah, I think, yes, I'm with you. I'm a big test, don't guess kind of person. But I do think for the most part, we see, a lot of benefits in magnesium every day for detoxification in the body and just overall support. I see, D3K2 as a really powerful one to support and omega-3s. I think those are kind of ones that I can generally say, look, this is pretty well needed in your body. I'm a really big fan of how you start your day in your body. So whether it's, just some really good hydration with electrolytes, I'm a big believer in that for women, really nourishing those adrenals, I think can be supportive. So getting a good non-toxic, non-sugar electrolyte, or just putting some sea salt and lemon in your water, or getting a really good greens for your gut first thing in the day, just to kick things off, is one of my favorite things. And I know you're talking supplements, but just, again, making sure you're having at least enough protein in your meals for sure. But, I think the aim of the game in perimenopause especially is support your gut, support your adrenals. And I think some of the best ways we can do that are these simple habits, but also hydrating, electrolytes, magnesium, those minerals, those can help support that, and detoxification in the body. So if we're not pooping every day, that's got to be, I think, priority number one. How do we get there?
Yeah. What other? Okay, we'll do one more thing, and then we got to wrap it up. So many topics here because they're just so consistent with all the things that we're talking about. So from a detox perspective, okay, yes, regular bowel movements, absolutely got to be. What's number two? What's your second most talked about form of detox?
The simple ones for sure. Sauna. I'm a big believer in sauna as well. Walking just simply for lymphatic drainage can be helpful. And hydration, again, with salt and your magnesium. People can be taking 5 times their body weight in micrograms of magnesium per day. So I don't even think many people are taking enough. But we could get fancy and discuss coffee enemas. I think that's another fun, for the right person, can be very beneficial for detoxification, but something that you should probably discuss with a practitioner.
Yeah. Do you want to give us a little more? We've never talked about that on this channel. Yeah. Tell us more about coffee enemas.
Okay. I know. When I first learned about them years ago, I was like, oh, I don't know that I'm there yet. But I will tell you, they're a really profound practice. So the benefit, what a coffee enema is what it sounds like, an enema using caffeine, using a specific non-toxic, organic mold-tested coffee to flush the colon. But what's unique about the coffee enema is that it stimulates the little valve between the colon and the liver so that it opens up and also gives a bit of a liver flush as well, and stimulates the production of glutathione, which is one of our master detoxifiers in the body. So much that it'll stimulate it to produce about 600 or 700 times what it normally would. And what we see, and it's been used for hundreds of years, certainly in Chinese medicine and other ways, to really advance and support healing in the body. So I always say, again, healing requires energy. The body needs to have energy and space to be able to heal. And so when we clear the things out that shouldn't be there, so we can start from coffee enemas, we can get rid of parasites, we can get rid of bacteria, we can get rid of yeast, things like that shouldn't be in there. But we're also really increasing that kind of superpower glutathione that's going to help boost our healing in our body faster.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I'm not a practitioner, but I've read about it. I think it is really compelling. And I know a lot of people that are big advocates. So maybe in the future.
Yeah, it's worth a shot.
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've been going for 35 minutes. I like to keep these short. So this has been a great review of the lifestyle pieces that are so critical, especially around perimenopause. Any last minute or last item that you want to pass along to our audience, and also let us know how they can find more about you?
Yeah, thank you. I think the big thing I want women to know is that this is the time to know your body. I think we spent a lot of time caring for other people, but our relationship with ourselves is one of the most important ones. And the only way we get good at that relationship is by listening and practicing. So take the time, take this gift right now to make the changes that you need. And I think go boldly after it at this age. It's important because we want to be more in our lives and not just less on a scale. And yeah, I have a podcast as well that Dr. Doug was on, and it was an incredible episode. So you should make sure to come and check that episode out. My podcast is called The Period Whisperer. It's all about hormones and perimenopause and menopause. You can find that anywhere you get your podcasts, or you can come hang out with me on Instagram at Bria_period_whisperer.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much again for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So I hope you enjoyed that interview with Bria and found it helpful. If you are still looking for help when it comes to your bone health and you haven't been to our masterclass, please consider coming to our masterclass. Link in the description on YouTube, or you can go to our website at osteocollective.com. But our masterclass is where we go through the top 5 mistakes that we see people make as they are trying to improve their muscle and bone health as they age. We have watched thousands of people go down this journey, and we have seen the same 5 things happen over and over again. I want to share those with you so we can time collapse your journey to success.